Welcome. I think I'm unmuted now, so I guess we just started. Thank you very much for joining this panel on the Can Academia or Foundation-funded projects help independent science journalism? Well, it's about money, and money is always an interesting topic, as follow the money is a well-known statement, and that's what we often do as journalists. Well, welcome all. My name is Krijn Soeteman, and I'll be your host for this afternoon. I'm a Dutch science and technology journalist and also the chair of the Dutch Science Journalism and Communication Association and the president of the European Federation for Science Journalism. But this is not about me, this is about our panelists, who I can see all of them right now, yes, in my gallery view, which is not available for the regular viewers. We have only 1 hour till, or even less, 55 minutes. So I think we should start. Our panelists are Gioia Lovison from Italy, Deborah Blum from the United States, Volker Stollorz from Germany, and Andrey Konyaev from Russia. Our guests do way too much to list everything, so I'll just give a very brief introduction of all of them. Gioia is the head of communication office at the University of Padua and supervisor of Ilbo Live, a multimedia community and scientific online journal of the University of Padua. Deborah is director of the Night Science Journalism program at MIT and publisher of the digital magazine Undark. Volker is chief editor of the Science Media Center in Germany and has a background in biology and philosophy. Andrey is publisher of the digital science magazine N+1 and has a background in mathematics. Well, I hope this was brief enough. And before we get started, I'd like to know from all of our panelists if we all agree on what academia and foundations actually mean, because depending on the country, it may be quite different and maybe even on your own thoughts or beliefs. Does any of you have a brief comment on what academia and foundations actually are? Gioia? I can't unmute you, but...
Thank you very much, Krijn, and thank you also the colleagues and the people who is listening to us. I will quote a very popular philosopher and writer in Italy. He was Umberto Eco. Unfortunately, he has died. And Umberto Eco maybe was hyperbolic, but he described academia and mass media with these words. Whatever the mass media are dealing with today, the university took care of it 20 years ago. And what the university does today will be reported by the mass media in 20 years. Attending a university means having 20 years of advantage. So I think that that's the great nature of academia, and that's the aim that we want to goal with our web journal.
So technically, academia are the universities and the research from universities. Yeah. Anyone else want to comment on what academia are or is?
I would agree with Gioia. I mean, I think of academia as educational institutions. So that's a little broader than just universities. Mm-hmm. And their output, which of course includes research, and a university can be a foundation or a nonprofit, right? So there's some overlap there. MIT is in fact a tax accredited nonprofit as well as being a university. But mostly we think of, at least I think of foundations as being more independent nonprofit entities with specific goals that sometimes overlap that of academia and sometimes do not.
Thank you. And Victor or Andrey, any thoughts on this? Or you just agree?
Yeah. Well,
Andrey?
Okay. Well, I think for me, academia is, first of all, it's not an institution. It's more about people, because people are the carriers of the ideas, and they are the ones that define the rules we live by. So I think that in my point of view, it has nothing to do with universities per se. It has to do with the people that live around the universities, that do research and write about this research. That is why I think, even though my background in mathematics, I have a more humanitarian view on the subject.
Thank you. I think it's time to start with the presentations of our panelists, unless anyone has anything else to add to this. I think just start in order which I received all your names. Let's start with Gioia, if you're fine by that.
Okay. So if I can spend a few words about our project, ILBO Live. ILBO Live is the University of Padua's web newspaper. Its institutional goals are clear, transparent. However, there are some conditions that render it a very particular, perhaps unique case in Italy. I don't know, even abroad, when I won't explain you why we are so peculiar. The first distinctiveness of its nature is its very long tradition. ILBO Live was founded over a century ago in 1919 by the students of the University of Padua, and only later it became property of the university, and several years ago it abandoned its paper format to find home on a digital platform. In addition to this, the University of Padua owns and manages all its official communication and PR channels, such as website, social media, mailing list, web radio run by students. In light of these factors, the mandate of ILBO Live is different from the mere promotion of university activities. In particular, 2 years ago, we established a new deal, a very new original and articulated mission. First, to define ourselves as a general interest cultural magazine that interprets the fact of the world. So science is an important but not the only component of our newspaper. ILBO Live investigates all the issues that may affect the society, from natural sciences to humanities, from art, politics to economics. We try to do so with an analytical, non-ideological approach, and we try to be an open newspaper because, of course, the editor is University of Padua, but, for example, within articles and interviews, university professors of University of Padua are generally not asked to describe their research activities, apart from some exceptional cases, but to express their visions or comments on the facts of the world. And considering that the number of these teachers and researchers, we can count on over 2,400 experts for sharing their views. That's a great deal. Moreover, around half of our experts, collaborators, belong to other universities or research institutes, public or private, and this ensures a great plurality, albeit under the banner of scientific rigor. And we try also to be a newspaper that seeks and obtain independence. This is an objective condition of conflict of interest that ILBO Live is the university newspaper. However, the university board has never put in place any pressure nor censorship, and we live in a condition of substantial independence. And also the editorial staff are extremely jealous of their independence. And The editorial staff is made by professionals. The director in charge is Professor Telmo Pievani, that is the rector delegate for communication, as well as a columnist for a prestigious Italian newspaper and scientific promoter, an evolutionary biologist, a philosopher of science. The chief editor is Pietro Greco, an experienced scientific journalist who wrote this speech with me, whom I thank. And Herbalife makes use of a conspicuous group of independent journalists of considerable prestige who are experts in various fields. So we try to have a group of professionals, independent, jealous of their independence. If you want, Krijn, I'll leave other colleague to interview.
If you are finished, maybe we have some questions. I don't see questions from the public right now. Maybe some questions from the colleagues or some remarks.
So I'm just curious about the independence, because there's certainly many university publications where the university does occasionally look over your shoulder and say, you know, are you really promoting us? And so I'm curious about how that arrangement was reached and what you do to make sure that it's kept in place.
Gioia?
Yeah. Can you repeat the last part of the answer, please?
Yeah, I was curious as to how you were able to negotiate an agreement with the university, and whether you have to continue to enforce it.
Yeah. As I said, the board is really never make pressures on the editorial staff. Even if our editor in chief is the delegate of the rector, we have this connection, but we really are totally independent in design what writing, what focus on. Of course, for example, we have some issues, some precise and outspoken editorial line on some issues, for example, fighting all the racism while promoting inclusion. And these two issues are, of course, also very central in the university own vision and active policies. But I can say that we are very free to innovate, also not only on issues we write about, but also on the format we use. Moreover, Herbalife is a cross-media journal. We use images, writing, videos, radio podcasts. So from the rector to the board, we are asked to innovate, to find new models. I think we are very lucky, and I think that is the reason for we can consider us unique case in Italy. We also can spend some money to pay all the professionals. So I think we are very, very lucky, and the University of Padua believes in this project strongly.
Thank you very much. Before we continue, I'd like to tell to our listeners that you have a question and answer screen, which you can reach when you see the bottom of your Zoom screen, and you can press Q&A. So if you have any questions, you can ask them there, and we'll see whether we ask them immediately after the speaker finished, or when whether we postpone them to the end of the meeting. Well, next up in my list is Deborah.
Thank you. So I'm going to talk a little bit about Undark, which is the science, a digital science magazine that I founded when I came to KSJ and continue to support through our endowment. But I want to put it in context with a couple other issues of, in particular, foundation support of publications. So KSJ is a almost 40-year-old science journalism fellowship program with the mission of raising the bar, improving science journalism, or illuminating it and trying to improve it around the world. And so when I came in, I wanted a magazine. I thought, let's have a magazine that first gives a home to good science writers who are looking for a place for their stories, but also demonstrates what we think good science journalism is at a very specific intersection of science and technology. And Undark sits specifically there. It does not do beautiful stories of snowflakes and fall leaves. It's very focused on the push and pull between science and technology. Once I had developed that concept with Tom Zeller, who's the editor-in-chief of the magazine. We spent about a year putting it together, and I want to say, as publisher, what I mostly do is stay out of the way. I support the magazine if crises arrives. I consult with the editor, but for me, my job as publisher is to hire really good people and let them do the outstanding work they're capable of doing. So I am not particularly a look over your shoulder kind of publisher. Undark has grown. Since it was founded, we launched it in April 2016. It had a readership in the thousands. It now has a readership in the millions. We're at what I call a steal our stuff model. We give everything away for free. So anyone can take a story that's published in Undark and republish it. And we have a republish button on our website. And in addition, we partner with a whole lot of other publications, The Atlantic, Smithsonian, Mother Jones, National Public Radio here in the US, and also publications in other countries. So our idea is, let's do good science journalism and let's get it out there as much as possible. The final point I want to make about that is that I'm committed to publishing this magazine. So we have set aside a budget for it. We have created and funded a staff for it, including a marketing director. And as long as we want this magazine to continue, which is forever, I hope, then it'll continue under our funding, which is one of the advantages of this kind of model. We don't get advertising. We're not influenced by, say, the corporate interest of advertisers. So it's a very pure model. There are others like this that I want to mention. The Gordon and Betty Moore Foundation funds Knowable, which is a very different science magazine about, insights into science and exploring science. The Simons Foundation funds Quanta, which is a math physics magazine, and they basically operate on the same kind of principle we do. They have steady foundation funding. They have an indefinite lifespan as long as, and this is the caveat, that foundation remains interested in that publication. And in the United States, we've seen a number of foundation-funded publications falter as the foundation that was invested in it moved on. And quite often, one of the things you'll see from foundations is that they will establish a publication with the agreement that that publication is eventually going to become self-sustaining, and then they'll cut it loose. So there's the publication Nautilus, for instance, gorgeous award-winning online science magazine, was funded by, and now I'm blanking on the foundation, but it's based in the UK. And that foundation eventually said, okay, we funded you for X number of years, you're on your own. That happened also with a publication here called Pacific Standard, which was a really gem-like little magazine. Its foundation moved on. So you have to be aware when you look at this model that sometimes you have a real long-term sustainable publication like Undark or Quanta. And sometimes you don't. You have a publication that then has to scramble and look for other sources of funding. So you can't always count on that kind of funding. You can also get in a situation with different foundations where they are more look over your shoulder and direct the content than I am. I don't direct the content. I fund the magazine. That's my role as publisher. And I serve as kind of a helpful consultant. And I occasionally write for it. Am in the world's greatest deal because I don't charge the magazine for anything I write. In general, though, we set a floor of paying about $1 a word. And that was one of the other things we wanted to do with Undark, $1 US, is that we wanted to say we're going to pay at least a minimal living wage for freelancers. We're going to pay quickly, and we're going to pay at this foundational level. So that's another issue that you think about when you go into these foundation funded magazines. Some magazines some foundations, are more hands-on. I was briefly on the board of another magazine published by Simons, which is a behavioral science magazine called Spectrum. And there they were very insistent on what that magazine was and what its audience was and what it could publish and what it couldn't publish, right? So sometimes you will find that with foundations, and when you're setting up, you want to also be aware of that. And the final thing I want to mention, we're seeing a lot more investment of nonprofits in journalism, certainly in the United States, as some of the old-time business models crumble, which I think is one of the reasons for discussing this issue. When you no longer have the old sustainable subscription advertising models, how do you support good science journalism? And in different ways, we're all investing in that. So for instance, this year, in the year of COVID-19, KSJ did not bring fellows to campus. I'm just about out of time.
Yep. Well, actually, Victor he had a question. He raised his finger.
Oh, sorry. I was so focused on what I was saying, Volker. Good to see you. I'm happy to answer a question.
Yeah. Who's going to start? Shall I start? It was my question.
Yeah.
So, Deborah, nice to see you. One question I have, because you give your science journalism for free away, in a way you are a competition for the press, which is still there, trying to make money by writing science journalism. How do you see this, that you give away for free very good science journalism? I totally agree, but you are basically in a competition then if you give it for free to other magazines or other newspapers, and are in competition with other science writers. Did you ever get this kind of argument?
That's a good question. And, it's one of the reasons that we say, well, we're supporting journalism by paying freelance writers, which is increasingly the landscape. And then we also enable those freelance writers to get a much larger footprint. If it appears in Undark and it then appears in the Atlantic, say, and often those writers then go on to write for the other publications that we partner with. It also enables us, and you're not wrong that there's an element of, we'll do this for free, but one of the other issues, certainly in the US, this is such a good question, Volker, is that a lot of small publications, like local newspapers, they don't have a science writer. They don't have anyone on the ground who's going to cover science anyway. And so one of the things that we have our marketing director do is that when we do a story that has, what's famously called the local angle, we'll reach out to publications there and say, we don't know if you've considered the fact that this story in your backyard has a strong science angle, and we would be happy to share this science story about it with you. And so we recently had an Undark story on the front page of a newspaper in Salt Lake City, Utah, which I consider a plus. It allows us to get good science journalism out there into markets and to readers in what we often call red states in the United States, because they tend to swing conservative and they tend to have a strong anti-science faction. And so, in the pro and con of this, I think overall we're weighing on the plus side in answer to your question. Is it perfect? It isn't, right? But, you know, I feel like we're actively doing some real good. This year, I wanted to mention briefly, and then I'll stop, and I'm happy to answer any other questions. We did a more direct push into supporting science journalism. Because of COVID-19, we did not bring fellows to Cambridge, Massachusetts, where MIT is based. Instead, we set up something we called project fellowships, which were simply directly to support science journalism in the United States. And so we're actually funding almost twice as many fellows as we normally do, but we're directly supporting different stories that they're working on that needed funding. And we are doing a whole diversity of different kinds of projects. We have a Native American science writer who's looking at the effect of oil extraction and fracking in Native American communities, for instance, right? So we have a Latina science writer who is looking at issues of GMO corn in Mexico. And so we're trying to really also this year, for better or for worse, to say, here's a moment for us just to put direct money directly into, in a foundation-like way, supporting journalists around the country.
Thank you very much. I have so many questions right now, but that's impossible to ask or answer them right now. It's interesting that what the question from Anna popped up to Gioia on measuring the success of ILBO Live, and apparently Undark measures its success pretty easy because you just said you have millions of views per month. How is that with ILBO Live?
Not millions, but we want to reach millions. Deborah, we can listen in separate moments. You can tell me all the magician. Well, you know, in Italy, we think we are a very, very well-read academic newspaper. We started 2 years ago. I checked my numbers. We had 50,000 monthly users on our website, and we have reached peaks in the COVID-19 pandemic, unfortunately, of 450,000 monthly users. So we are very proud of this result.
And that's only in Italian, the language, I suppose?
No, we are able to publish once a week also in English. On this specific theme, we have specials also in English. For example, one special on nuclear fusion. All given in English, 10 episodes on YouTube, linked in our newspaper. So we are very proud of this. And if I can add just one thing, yes, about how maybe we can save some money. We hire, as I previously said, we hire professional staff, but also we were so lucky that at the University of Padova, there were people, colleagues of mine, that has a professional in journalism. We try to work with them because without ILBO Live, they will have made administrative jobs. So for us, it was great to collaborate with these colleagues, administrative staff, but journalists that can practice the professional. So it was great for us because 3 or 4 publishers are administrative staff of the university, but also journalists.
Okay, thank you. Very interesting to hear all this. I have so many ideas already for collaborative whatever. But before we just do some chatter, let's go to Victor. I think you're the next one on the list.
Me, Volker? Okay.
Yeah, Volker, sorry. Yeah.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, thanks for taking me. And the Science Media Center is a kind of one of these new intermediaries between science and journalism. And we try to help journalism and science journalists also to find and spot scientific expertise when public issues are debated in the public domain. And so we are a kind of a knowledge broker. That's the best way to describe what we aim to do. And it's interesting how we came about. So the idea of setting up a Science Media Center in Germany came up with the science journalism community itself. So the German Association of Science Journalists thought that would be a good idea to have such an institution to help journalists, either the ones covering science regularly or some other journalists who are not covering science issues regularly. And we thought it would be a good idea to have a non-profit editorial independent institution that could aim at supporting journalism, finding, locating, and getting at scientific expertise if science hits the headlines, basically. So when public issues are complex, public issues need to be understood, like COVID, for example, is certainly. And the idea, we walked around for 3 years to trying to find support by foundations. And in Germany, it's different, like Deborah in the US. The interest of foundations in journalism is pretty low because we have still some very strong journalism. We have a public radio, public television, we have good developed newspapers, and we have also strong regional press. So foundations were at the time not yet interested, but I met one personally, I met Klaus Tschira Foundation. He's a former businessman who founded with colleagues SAP, the big European software company. And he, after that, set up a foundation explicitly to foster science communication in society. And as when I talked to him, I said, well, we would need such a science media center in German-speaking languages to help journalists cover the more and more complex issues in science. He basically understood, because he was an avid reader and consumer of journalism, that this was very important. And so he said, well, I will fund you for 3 years, then I will evaluate. And if you pass the evaluation, I may consider funding you after that date. And so we were basically funded out of this with just a major funder, one major funder, who gave us 500,000 euros a year for 3 years, so as a startup. And then we could start, and we developed certain products, which we do. And what we basically do, you can find it on our website. We have different services. And the difference maybe between the two examples you just heard is that we do no final products. So we don't write articles or do a video. We just have, for example, rapid reactions by giving quotes from scientists, or when a new article appears under embargo, we will ask scientists to kind of comment on that new study, and we will distribute this to our registered journalists who can have the service for free, and then get some orientation about whether it's a breakthrough or what is the critical point, and this kind of. Then we have fact sheets, and we have virtual press briefings where we get together experts on a certain topic, and then they will discuss issues which are in need to be discussed. And then the reporters can just dial in and get more information about that issue. And we also develop in our SMC lab, we have software engineers, and we develop new services which can help science journalists or other journalists, for example, find experts who have domain-specific expertise. So, for example, we developed a tool called Expert Explorer, which you type in Corona, and you look for an expert in Corona in your country, and the algorithm will go into PubMed and will extract experts who have a higher bibliometric score on that issue, and then you can click on and you get the experts in your country on that specific topic. And this is just for free. And if you don't have domain-specific knowledge, you can find credible experts inside science by that way. So these are the kinds of things we try to do. And we basically provide the raw material for good journalism about science. And basically our idea is not to replace or let's say to overcome the journalists who are there, but being kind of a helpful service for them with the issue everybody is facing. And I think the issue everybody in science journalism, which is basically the observation of science and putting it in relevance to what the society is going to talk about, that is basically what science journalism is all about. So connecting these dots, what society needs and what science can offer. And I think the crucial thing is that even if you look at the scientific publication record, we have 2.5 million papers every year written, and nobody has found a way to just digest that information flood. And we try to develop tools how you can do better orienting in complicated scientific fields. Take preprints, it's a good thing. So before, science journalists did read scientific publications, Nature, Science, New England Journal of Medicine, and now certainly in Corona, everybody is publishing on preprints. But how can you rate the quality of a preprint without having to wait for the peer review, which did not yet take place? So this is a very interesting problem for science journalism in general. So what do you do if you do not have a reputation from a journal you can kind of find? And we try to develop tools where we can download papers from preprints and check what interest they get inside the scientific community, in social media, and then try to develop algorithms that you can get recommendation systems which do better than just reading all the papers published every day. And I think the final word about funding. So our funding model so far is, so the foundation decided after the 3-year period that they will continue funding us basically as a non-specified grant, and the time schedule is not reduced. And but we also aim to do more, and so we have a kind of a multi-funder model. So we can get new funders like universities or research organizations that can fund us with little money, let's say 5,000 euros a year. And we have so far 15 other funders who put money into this organization. And we also do with our SMC lab just research cooperations with university to attract third-party funding. And with that funding, we develop new tools to enable what we call augmented science journalism for the future. So we do research also in our lab and collaborate with computer scientists, software engineers, data scientists to develop better tools. And I think this mix of finance makes it possible to deliver the services we want to deliver to make journalism better when it covers science.
Thank you. Very interesting story on what's happening on the east of the country where I live in. Also very interesting that you use software engineers and you see them as very important because technically they're the new printing press. One quick question. Do you actually demand universities to pay to get published with their scientists, or is that just voluntarily?
No. There's no, we develop a scientific expert database totally independently. So our science journalists basically look into certain public issues, try to find the reputable experts in this field, and that's totally independent from any funder or connection or whatsoever. So there's no way that the university can say, I give you 5,000 euros and I need 100 experts in a database. No. That's not the way it works. So if you want to fund us, you agree that you, like Deborah said, you are kind of a publisher. You have no influence in the decisions we take. Otherwise, you will not be a funder. And every funder has to underwrite a declaration of independence, I'd say, to just state as specifically this. And so if a funder thinks he can suggest a topic, let's do this or write about this, we take our independent editorial decision. There's no influence whatsoever.
Yeah, thank you. I think it's time to continue to Andrey, and then hopefully we have about 5 to 10 minutes left for some questions and discussion. Andrey?
Hello. I don't think I will be very long. It was an interesting, insightful conversations. I learned a lot actually about how people do things not in Russia. Okay, I'll tell about my own experience as everybody does. I have nothing else except my own experience. So I do not believe in any foundations. Maybe it is because I'm from Russia and it's here you can definitely write a Declaration of Independence, but in the end, it may end up meaning nothing. So my idea was to build, I'm not only publisher, but like co-founder of the N+1 magazine. I conceived this idea in the form that we need to be independent by design. The only thing I know how to be independent by design is to be a medium with a strong separation between commercial part and journalistic part. It means that inside our N+1 magazine, we have scientific writers, we have journalists that do writing, and we have a commercial director and people that deal with commercial stuff. And the communication between them is strongly prohibited. They only communicate through me. I'm the publisher. I do keep a total control of this separation. This is the only thing it works, because both of them, they actually, they have different KPIs. They have different targets. They have different indicators of success, because for journalists, it is a quality of writing. It is a number of readers. We do have like 2-3 million million visitors per month, not including actually about 1 million on social media. So that is what the journalists should think about. They should think about good stories and not about searching for funding. That was my idea. So I am the one that thinking about funding. But when we talk to funds, which was, I think it was Deborah that said that the problem with foundations, that at some point they may decide they do not want to give you money anymore, because they just like kind of change their mind. These things happen to the best of us. I remember AAAC's grant for journal called US. Do you remember Nautilus? It was award-winning design. It was awesome quality of publication. Since then, I haven't seen anything like that in terms of user experience on site, but it is closed now because it was awesome, but money ended. So what we do is standard commercial stuff. We do native advertising, which in case of science journalism is a very complicated thing, as you may guess, because we have a lot of blacklisted companies. We do not do pharma, big pharma, for example. The companies we do business with we have a lot of problems in communication, because when we do communicate with them, we had to uphold our publishing standards, and that is always a problem for them, because what they want is deliver the message they think they have paid for, while they didn't pay for the message. They paid for the project we are making together. It is always hard to maintain partnership in communication like this when someone gives you money, because people tend to think if they give you money, then we are not partners. They kind of pay you, which is not the case. So, but I think that it is worth doing, because we've been doing our job for 5 years, which is quite long, especially in Russia. We didn't close because of the COVID epidemics. We're still afloat, which is a good news, which are good news. So I think that's it.
Thank you very much, Andrey. I see.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah, of course.
Andrey, I would like to know, when you talk about native advertising, what exactly do you mean by this? So I have a funder, I give you 5,000 euro or whatever, and what do you do?
No, it's never like this, because if it goes like you said, it's not a native advertising. What do you, offer to the any commercial company that comes to you. You offer a unique expertise in communicating with your own audience. That is what we can do. We have a very high quality audience, like software engineers and people. The thing is that in Russia, people that get a good education, like in physics and mathematics and stuff, they tend not to continue not to pursue scientific career. They tend to go and work for large companies. Google, Yandex, we have our own IT giant company, and stuff like that. Most of them keep in mind that they're interested in, because when they chose their specialty, it was by heart, so they still are interested, even though they're actually a high-paid top manager, they're still interested, I don't know, in molecular biology. So we have a unique expertise in communicating with these people. We do right stuff they're interested about. Not very many people can do that. So that's what we offer. Then we start with the first discussing what exactly they want to say to our readers, because using the means of native advertising. After we discussed what they're trying to say, we discuss how, and that's like the main problem. Because everyone wants to, especially when you advertise, okay, we very rarely advertise specific products. Most of the time, companies want to deliver conceptual messages. Every native advertising is labeled, and the content, sponsored content, is separated from the regular one. But still, the quality, because the good thing about native advertising, because most of the people, and mostly when I say about when I talk about native advertising, we can see only minuses. But the big plus is you get money to do what else you couldn't have done. For example, with one Russian bank, we did software testing using neural interfaces. It means that it's standard neural marketing procedure. When you take interface, mobile interface, then they put these things on your head. They record the electrical signals. They also track your eyes. And what you get in the end is that you get your own experience with this specific app on mobile phone with proof and with real scientific statistics to uphold this. For example, here you can see that I was in stress because I was the one sitting in the chair and stuff like that. That is why with native stuff, we can get more creative, something like that. Did I answer your question?
Volker?
Yeah, well, I don't know. So I'm just, what I want to say is that wherever you get the money from, even if it's from a company or from a foundation, or even if it's from your customers, people just paying for reading the stuff, in a certain way, you always have kind of independence problems. And I think journalism was basically invented to find institutions that can manage this conflict of interest in the public interest. I think any institution who can uphold editorial independence can be called journalism, and any publication who cannot be called journalism. I would say that's a very strict statement, and so I'm more interested in the social practices that lead to editorial independences than in discussing where does the money come from. It can be different types, and the risks to take that money are always the same, basically. And therefore, our model is this multi-funder model with people who do not wish to want to influence our editorial decisions. I think it's stable, but not the perfect model, of course.
Now we have many people. Deborah was the first one to raise her hand, and then Gioia. So Deborah, please.
Volker, I don't want us to cast a rosy glow over this sort of entrepreneurial journalism of the past, because as we know, over the years, advertisers themselves, never mind foundations and other people who have interests, advertisers themselves have often sought to influence journalistic content. And journalism itself is, although is often subjective in the focus that we take and the stories we choose to tell and the narrators we choose and all of the above. So I mean, I think it's important in the same way that I believe that we cover science as a human enterprise. And if we don't do that, we fail at what we do, because science is a human enterprise with all of the human ups and downs and complexities that surround that. But I think we also have to be willing to put ourselves under that same scrutiny and say, we're a human enterprise too, right? And how do we monitor ourselves and do the best we can? And that's separate from monetary interests. That also has to do with choices we make ourselves. That's all.
Gioia?
Just a few words about the Italian situation about independence of journalism, because in Italy there are a lot of new media, so web journal, that are run by journalists themselves, but they are instinctively independent, but they have not sufficient funds to carry out their web journal. On the other side, we have a long history of media owned by political or industrial groups in Italy. The most famous is Berlusconi families that own the Mediaset television that cannot be independent. So we have this Italian paradox that maybe with the Bo Live we have separated, we have solved. This Italian paradox is that the professional journalism often finds itself in conflict of interest, while independent journalism is too ill-founded to be able to carry out a professional activity. So I think that our academic journal is very lucky because we found the project entirely with academic resources. We are launching some books, we sell them, and they have a good success, but we have the university that believes in us. So we have the funds to do a good journalism, scientific journalism.
Thank you, Gioia. I see that one of the attendees raised her hand. I'd like to ask if attendees can ask the question in the question and answer panel. And otherwise, I'd like to say that we have about 3 minutes left. So if any of you have something they really need to say, because I had some questions and all of the questions were answered. And new ones popped up, but that would just raise more discussion. So, Andrey, did you have any comments?
No, I mean, the way I see it is just the media of the past. Well, most of the journalism, the good journalism, should be paid for, and the money should come from some place. And for me, the thing we do seems suitable. I see that for some of my colleagues it does not, but that's okay.
Volker?
Maybe I would add one thing, and Deborah, we talked about that. I think what is interesting that the media landscapes are so different in Italy from the United States, from Germany. So on the one hand, it's very difficult to compare these media situations in different countries. But on the other hand, we can learn a lot by just talk to each other and collaborate. And also discuss the problems in certain models and not in other models. And sometimes even in Germany, you have public television and you think everything is fine. And then certainly a new politician comes and then it's not fine anymore. Like you say, Andrey, I totally agree. So it's very, I think journalism is dependent on factors on its thriving that he cannot control totally on itself. And then in the end, it goes back to the journalist as a subject doing journalism and finding ways to do it. I mean, basically that's still what is sadly the case. But you can have more, let's say, willingness to accept that this independent journalism and independent science journalism, observing science, is crucial for the democracy. And I think this differs between different countries, of course. But it's interesting to look and compare what other countries see developing, even in this new digital communication age.
Yeah, the digital communication age, which also gave a lot of people an extra voice, and we have not even been able to talk about those funded, well, science programs like here in the Netherlands. You have certain YouTube channels which gain a lot of traction and everything. They look very serious, and they also have serious candidates, but they also have well, less curated people. I find it it is a very complex subject, but I learned a lot today. Thank you all very much for being here, and thank you all the attendees for attending. I hope you learned something. I at least have a lot of things to, well, put it in the back of my mind and just, well, maybe we should work together with Germany, because I believe we have some of the same problems here in the Netherlands, which you seem to have resolved. And maybe also with Italy, and maybe also with the United States, and maybe also with Russia. So, well, we see where we go. I would like to thank you very much and enjoy your evening. I'll be back on in about 5 or 6 minutes for the Climate Grant Award ceremony and the Science Journalist of the Year Award ceremony. So see you later. Goodbye.
Of course. Bye.
Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.